Hi guys, welcome Ashok Shabri, and welcome all of you
Hello.
there out in the audience. So today's this advanced webinar is part of a series that we have on systemic coaching. We've had, I think, one session so far, and what we have today within that systemic coaching framework, it's a framework to assess, to establish the cultural nuances and so on, with something that I have experienced with Ashok, who's the creator of this framework called EUM. He will explain the details of that. But I just want to, before I invite Ashok to start the program, the rest of it is on, and it's going to take about an hour and a half. So those of you who planned only for an hour now, if you want to leave, that's up to you. But I would request all of you stay here. The interesting part of this is that this process, which I was trained by Ashok, was one of the best that I have seen in terms of relating to the larger systemic perspective of an organization. Most of the psychometrics that we use in coaching address the individual. A few of them claim that they address the team, but they don't. They actually shift the lens from the individual to others in the team looking at the individual. And so what really happens is that the lenses are different. So like a Johari's window, you present different viewpoints of the individual from the individual as well as other people, including the boss and so on. Whereas the EUM framework I found refreshingly very different, because it allowed the individual as well as members of a team to look at a larger organizational perspective. They looked at the system as well. And there was a part of it which was a diagnostic, which gave some phenomenally powerful, I think the recording is going on somewhere, the voice says it stopped, but anyway, I'll continue. It gave a tremendously different perspective into the organization. So when I was going through this training program, when Ashok had presented an overall diagnostic of an organization based on inputs that were received from individuals in the organization and team members, one could pretty much see the personality of the organization. And many of us were able to identify the organization from an anonymous diagnostic description. And that was the power of this. EUM framework, there's only one other framework that I have used which addressed the larger cultural perspective imperative. That was called the Barrett's framework, which was based on Graves' model, who in turn developed it based on Maslow's. In some senses, Ashok said that he also has based some of his framework on the Graves, so there are parallelities. But I found this model of EUM, Ashok's model, far superior to anything that I have used, which is one of the reasons I really wanted him to come here and present that to you. There has already been another colloquium where he had done that, but here specifically from a systemic point of view. And we are also hoping that over the next few months, we would sort of put together a partnered webinar with Ashok, which would help people certify in this program as well, that we will be announcing at a later point in time. You see Magda's name here, but unfortunately Magda is not here. Nishmita is using the computer in Magda's name, so she will be putting it on the Facebook stream and other stuff. I'll be primarily monitoring the chat box to see what questions come up and feed them back to Ashok and Shabri so that they can dialogue on it, answer. So the program is going to be for 1.5 hours. Somewhere towards the 1 hour point, I'll let you know what the password for today is. So you know the system, you can write in, and you have already registered, so you can put in the password and claim your CCs. So without further ado, I'm handing it over to Ashok and Shabri. And of course, it's not a mystery. Today, Ashok is also going to introduce you the Game of Thrones through the EUM lens. All yours, Ashok.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I enjoyed immensely the last time I had interacted with in this webinar through Coacharya, and Shabri was not there at that time, and this is the first time she's joining in. I'm sure she's going to have a great time. She and Ram are the coaching experts here. So I'm looking forward to their inputs in terms of, making it more relevant and meaningful from a coaching point of view. What I intend to do is to look at the Game of Thrones, a very popular serial, through the EUM lens. And we'll tell you a little bit about the EUM lens. The way I'm not going to go into great detail about EUM per se, and then also examine what are some of the implications for systemic coaching. As many of you may have attended Ram's webinar last month, and you may recall that he had talked of system at various levels. So he had talked of team as a system. We had talked of the larger function, department to which the team belongs as a system. We had talked about the organization as a system, and we had talked about the larger ecology as a system. So it kind of talked about how system can be looked at in various ways. One of the concepts which I found very useful to understand this phenomenon is the concept of holon. Holon is a term which was coined by Arthur Koestler, and very simply it means something which is whole in itself and is also part of a larger whole. In a sense, everything in this universe can be seen as a holon. Letter of an alphabet is whole and complete in itself, but is part of a word. Word is whole and complete in itself, but is part of a sentence, which is part of a paragraph, which is part of a chapter or a book or whatever. So in many ways, this is something that we are all the time. I think it is this linkage between the part and the whole which I believe is at the heart of systemic coaching. Individuals and systems are intertwined with each other. You can't think of systems without individuals, and you can't think of an individual except in relation to the system to which that individual belongs. So when you want to understand an individual, you have to take into account the system to which this individual belongs. And just as if you have to understand the system, you have to understand the people who form or constitute that system. This relationship between the individual and the system has both a preservative component and as a transformative component. They preserve each other and they also transform each other. A system can't change unless people within that system change. And when people change, the system also changes. Similarly, the system is preserved because of the people. Can you imagine, for instance, a feudal system existing unless the people simultaneously believe that in the divine right to rule? So there are certain things which must happen at the individual level for the system to preserve as also transform. In other words, what I'm saying is that systems exist in the minds of people, and systems lay down the broad parameters of the right ways to be for the individual. Now, before I go on with this, let's look at a few snippets. Let's look at a snippet from the Game of Thrones, which we will be using as an illustration, and see how it means. And this is an interaction which is taking place between Cersei and Ned Stark. And I would invite you to pay attention to the picture in the mind of the system as Cersei holds, and the picture in the mind of the system as Ned Stark holds. Can we have that snippet, Sharbari?
Yeah.
Wait. Let
Sorry about the sound. I don't know what is happening. Why aren't people not able to hear?
I don't know how much of it when many of you could hear. Essentially, the idea of this was to see that whereas for Cersei, the system is essentially one in which you either win or you die. That's the nature of the system as she holds. So therefore, all her idea about the right way to be is of one kind. On the other hand, for Ned, the system also has space for certain honorable actions. He doesn't want, as he says, I don't want their blood on my hand. Nor does he think that his having not taken the king, becoming the king was a wrong thing for him to do. From Cersei's point of view, that's what he ought to have done. So the two of them have a different way in which they are looking at the system and different in terms of what is the right way to be in that system. Now, the question that it raises is, do people like Ned have a space here? If so, of what kind? And what does their notion of honor really mean? Right? Is that the only notion of honor which is permissible? Or are there other notions of honor which are also possible in the same system? Let's look at another snippet, and I hope the sound is better this time, to contrast Ned's idea of honor with that of his foster son, Jon
Jon
Snow's
Snow.
idea.
Shabri,
Yeah.
Parameshwar has made a point there. He says that you seem to be using the microphone audio rather than the line in audio. I mean, is that something that you understand what to do?
Okay. All right. Let me just take out my headphone. And actually, it was on a line audio only, but let me just take that out and see. Just give me a second, okay?
Yeah, and also whether like Ujjwal says, the Zoom computer sound sharing is there. What's happening? I think some of the settings may be right or wrong. Yeah.
I'll just do it.
So while we are doing this, Ashok, there's a question from Vijay.
Yeah.
Apart from the perspective, is it also a difference in their values? And does a value constitute part of the system?
Yeah, that's that. And we are saying the point that we probably make here and as we're going along is that there are values in which people look at partly from their own perspective and partly from their way of the system as they hold. And we'll, for instance, see how the same value of honor is held by Jon.
Okay, let's try that.
Like
yeah.
there is a value, Ned and Jon both place a high value on what they regard as honor. But does honor mean the same thing to Jon? And does honor mean the same thing to Ned? And is there a difference in terms of the way they are looking at the system, which makes them define honor in different ways?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
We want to try again, Shabri?
Yeah, I will just use the second, and I'm now on computer audio and computer thing.
Okay.
So
Let's see. Let's hope for the best.
yeah, let's hope.
It's a very interesting piece. One can go on with it. But I think from the point of view of what we are talking about here, now I'd like you to pay attention to what honor means to Ned and what honor means to Jon. For Ned, honor is a personal thing. It is in terms of what he will do and what he will not do. What will, in a sense, bring disrepute to him or not bring disrepute to him. In contrast, Jon has a very different way of looking at it. He's willing to be seen as a kind of deserter, that he was appointed as the king and he has given up the kingdom. But his perspective is larger. He's looking at what is necessary for the system as a whole. Honor for him is not just about him as an individual. Honor for him is about what is needed for the system to which he belongs. And I'd like you to keep this in mind, because it is this which actually, with all his honorable action, people like Ned only preserve the system, they cannot transform the system. It is only when a person looks at the totality of the system, and we'll come to some of these issues later, that a new kind of perspective emerges. And when we look at the EUM framework, we will see what are the various universes from which these differential notions of honor come. So essentially, at this point in time, to cap up, what we are saying is one, systems and individuals are intertwined with each other. You cannot understand a system without understanding the individual. You cannot understand an individual without understanding the system to which this individual belongs. And consequently, this simultaneity of self and system is at the heart of the EUM framework. The second thing we are saying is that systems exist in minds of people. It is not just a reality out there. It is the map of the system as an individual holds. What is the notion of the system which the person holds, which becomes important. The third thing we are saying is that systems lay down the parameters of what is the right way to be for an individual. That this is the nature of the system, and this therefore constitutes the right way. Now, everyone doesn't necessarily abide by it. And we will go on and see how different people engage with these parameters of the system in their own individual way. And finally, we are saying that systemic coaching entails engagement with patterns of membership. It does not entail only with understanding the individual. It does not entail just understanding of the system. It essentially entails how does the individual hold the system in his or her mind? What is the nature of membership which the individual gives to himself or herself? And what are some of the psychological roles which the individual takes? Now, I'd like to take a stop here for a few minutes, deal with whatever questions, comments, observations that may be there, and then go on and talk about how some of these things are looked at in the EUM framework, and then come back to GOT and apply the framework to GOT per se. Yes, Ram, yeah. Hello, I can't hear you, Ram.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. As you said here, the systems lay down the parameters of the right way to be, which essentially reflects that morals, ethics, culture, these are creations of the system, not of individuals. So one of the questions here is, does it mean the systems are more perceptive? This was a question asked by Hema. My own take on that is systems influence the perceptions, but whether they are perceptive, you can answer that. There's a question from Vijay Raghavan. Does system here refer to organization as a whole or smaller teams? And Hema's question again is, would the perception be based on, I don't know, or would it be based on the lifetime conditioning of an individual?
Quick responses. Firstly, when we are talking of the system, and I take you back to Ram's webinar last month, that you are talking of an ever expanding circle. You are talking of not just necessarily only a team. Now, this also depends upon the individual. For an individual, the confinement of the system, and as you will see in EUM, you would see that how the notion of the system expands for the individual. For
we
some
lost
people,
your show.
You lost me. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we are losing you. Your internet connection, if you want to switch off the band video, maybe you're more clear. Just check that, please.
Yeah, Ashok, I think switch off the video.
How do I switch off the video?
Okay, I'll just come and help.
Okay.
Draven, the question that you asked is a system and dynamic and fluid
Yeah.
to each or more rigid. It's a great question. It purely depends on our perceptions. The individual within the system sometimes may think it's very fluid, it's very dynamic, they can influence that. Some of them may think it's very rigid. I think it's a constant dynamic of the individuals as well as a team with the system that is going on. I guess Ashok can explain that far more in detail.
No, Ram, not very much more than what you have already said. In our framework, both the individual and the system are multiple, pluralistic, and also dynamic. Now, what happens is that each of us tends to take a narrow view of the system, and we define our roles only and our membership from that narrow perspective. We say system is like this only. It is only when you start saying that system is not just this, system is plural, system has many things. And that's when your elbow room increases. Your membership and elbow room increases when you start seeing the multiplicity of the system and multiplicity of the self. So in that sense, systemic coaching is all about understanding that there are other ways of relating to a system. That my notion of what I'm only seeing a narrow side of the system. I have a tunnel vision. Can I expand that vision of what the system is and accept that it is dynamic and not just a static thing per se. So dynamicity of the self, and that's why if you recall in the beginning I said individuals and systems both preserve each other and they also transform each other.
Ashok, an underlying
Yeah,
theme that
yeah.
seems to be coming out from the various questions, if I articulate it slightly differently from the way it has been put down there, at
Yeah.
what point in a system as an individual am I in a position of empowerment to influence, to transform the system? And at what point in the system
Okay.
am I sufficiently disempowered that the system controls me?
Ram, can we hold on to this question?
Sure.
Okay, because I think the entire thing is all about that. Taking GOT as an example.
Okay.
But we are saying in GOT, for instance, what are the various types of memberships which have emerged?
Yeah.
And which of these memberships would, kind of help in the dynamicity of the system and which of these will not? So can we hold on to that question for a
Sure.
while?
And one question from Somayaji is very Vedantic. He wants to know whether it is individualistic or dualistic. So from a Vedantic point of view.
Well, I'm not a philosopher to be able to answer that. But all I can say is that in some ways, if one accepts that the microcosm is a representative of the macrocosm, that the drop of the ocean contains all the properties of the ocean. So the microcosm, in a sense, is a representative of the macrocosm. In that case, it becomes, what you would call as monoistic, and there is no duality per se. That there is, it is this or that kind of a thing. But there is the essential duality of the part and whole, which I talked about in the whole-on thing.
Yeah.
That everything is necessarily both a part and a whole.
So for the lowest common denominator where most of us belong, it's very dualistic, I guess.
Anyway, let's leave that aside for a while.
Right.
I guess it also depends upon Ram and Ashok in the way of how much difference or gap do I experience between me and the system, or do I look at myself as part of the system, or do I experience myself as separate from system?
That's right.
I think that's what Ashok is going to talk about.
True.
Okay, shall we
Yeah.
move to the next
Yeah.
one?
Yeah.
Okay, if I go on from where what Ram had said, that there are several frameworks for understanding individuals. There are several frameworks for understanding the system, the organization, the team, or whatever, in whichever way one defines the system. And one can look at system at all these levels. What we do in EUM, that we look at these two together. We are using the same lens to look at the individual, and we are looking at using the same lens to look at the system as a whole, so that one can look at the nature of relatedness which exists. Basically, the framework has been inspired by the work of Graves, and it posits 6 universes. Now, there are infinite universes within each one of us, but for sake of simplicity, we have taken 6 universes, and these 6 universes have a correlation both at the individual level and the system level. The individual universes in EUM are captured through what is called EUM I, or EUM individual. The systemic universes are captured through what is called EUM O, or EUM organization. Let me clarify that the organization could mean several things. It could also mean a team, it could also mean a family, it could also mean a community. So organization is not a frozen notion of only formal work organizations, per se.
Anything that is an organized
Yeah.
system.
You saying something?
I'm just saying anything that is an organized system.
Yeah.
Family, society, organization, workplace, a community, anything that is an organized system.
So let's very briefly look at what these 6 universes are. And you will see the correspondence. At the individual level, the first universe is what we call the universe of belonging and protection. Very simply, it corresponds to that part of us which seeks a safe haven, which wishes to put down roots, which says, I am because I belong here. This is what my belonging system is. This is where I feel safe. So, which finds its identity primarily from the system of its belonging. The systemic equivalent is what we call a clan. Now, clan is a kind of organization which provides that sense of belonging and protection to its members, which encourages high degree of compliance, which encourages high degree of loyalty amongst its members, but also emphasizes its established ways. Have we lost a show? Can't hear. Again, there is some problem. Ram?
No, I can hear you.
Shabri, can you hear me? Because I
Yes, I
got a
can.
message here which said that we can't.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe Sindhuja has a problem, but I can hear you perfectly.
I can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. I can hear. A
Most
lot of
people can
people are
hear.
saying.
Yeah. Most people can hear. Yeah.
Also. So often, for instance, we say we are here like a family. It's a family system. So therefore, we have close relationships. Associations continue. Many organizations, places in India, certainly, even after people have left the system, they continue to remain associated with each other. So they are ex ITC groups, ex Bamalori groups, ex ICI groups, and stuff like that, institutes. So there is a certain pull of the system which primarily creates an opportunity for people to belong and relate. So that clan is the equivalent, systemic equivalent of universe of belonging and protection. The second universe at the individual level is what we call universe of strength and desire. This is that part of us which wishes to assert our individuality, which says, okay, belonging is fine, but I also have my own needs. I also have my own desires. I'm potent. I want to fulfill them, and I want to assert my own individuality. I want challenge. I want excitement. The systemic equivalent is what we call an arena. The organization provides a space to people to showcase their talent, to showcase their capability, and also, 1 minute, where people, there are issues of dominance, submission, survival of the fittest, and all that. With street smartness, competitiveness, these are also part of a system. So that's the arena part. The third is what we call the universe of roles and boundaries. This is that part of us which seeks order and stability and clarity of expectations. So what is required of me, what is expected of me, and what can I expect from others. The systemic equivalent is what is called a clockwork, where everything happens in a fairly predictable, predetermined manner, where each component knows what its function is, what its role is, what is expected from it, and operates in a way so that the total system can act accordingly. The fourth is what we call the universe of purpose and achievement, which is, all right, this is, my expectations are clear, there is stability, but human beings also want to transcend. They want to extend themselves. They want to achieve. They want to go beyond what is laid out for them. Now, this may seem like universe of strength and desire, but it's very different. In universe of strength and desire, the primary focus is on power, whereas in UPA, the primary focus is on achievement. And a recognition that in order to achieve, one needs to forge mutually beneficial links with others. You cannot only compete, you also need to learn to collaborate and create networks which are held together. So the systemic equivalent is a network where each individual is an autonomous node connected with other nodes in a way that the common purpose can be achieved. The fifth universe is what is called universe of meaningfulness and intimacy, where you are saying, okay, achievement per se is fine, but achievement towards what end? What, in the larger scheme of things, what meaning does it have? What meaning does my success have? How does it add either to my quality of life or to the ecology of which I'm a part? To be able to meaningfully contribute to the context. There is a part of us which aspires for a utopian kind of existence where everyone can live in harmony. Universe of meaningful and intimacy comes from that. The systemic equivalent is what we call ecology, where you say that every system is part of a larger system and has to meaningfully contribute to the larger system to which it belongs. The system is not isolated. Now, many of you ask this question, system means what? Clearly, for some at a clan level, the system is only one's own immediate team, one's immediate group, one's own immediate family. At an ecological level, the system is a very wide thing. Now, if you look at again, I talked to you about Ned and John. You see the difference here. For John, the system is a much larger entity than it is for Ned. Ned is also an honorable man, but he's honorable in the context of his limited definition of the system to which he belongs. Whereas John is looking at his membership in a much larger way. The sixth universe is what we call universe of duality and simultaneity, Very briefly, what it means is that all these other five are integral parts of us and are competing with each other. So your need for safety tells you to avoid challenge, but your need for adventure pulls you in another direction. Your need for clarity and orderliness, which is the URB phenomena, pulls you in one way, the UPA will pull you in another way. So this tension between the various universes is held in the universe of duality and simultaneity. The systemic equivalent is what we call holonic, which comes from the same term that I talked about earlier, where there is a recognition that every system is whole in itself and every system is part of a larger whole. Many times we either emphasize the parthood or we emphasize the wholeness. And we forget that part and whole must simultaneously coexist. So these are the six universes. Now what happens in EUM, what we try to do, and which is what we will try and do in case of GOT in a little more detail in in the next segment, is see what is the individual orientation and what is the systemic orientation. For instance, if a person is high on UBP, this person will feel very
Ashok,
comfortable in a clan. Yeah,
Ashok, when
yeah.
you say UBP, please just mention that UBP means universe of belonging and protection.
Okay, so an individual who's very high in universe of belonging and protection will feel very comfortable in a clan organization or a clan system, but will feel totally out of place in an arena system. An individual who's very strongly anchored in universe of strength and desire will feel very out of place in a clockwork. So which part of the system you will sustain and which part of the system will create discomfort with you and how will you see the system is partly dependent upon your own orientation and partly dependent upon the nature of the system per se. It is this interplay between the individual and the system which we try to capture through the EUM framework. Let me take a pause before going back to the GOT and invite if there are any questions, comments, observations at this stage.
Yeah, Ashok, there was a question from Elaine about the whole concept of culture and what happens. Question is, how does one person create their own culture? Culture reflects group values. Many systems consist of one group, exclude other groups from becoming part of a system. And fitting into a group of a system requires open-mindedness and becoming receptive to the mixed group to grow the system. It's part of a statement, part of them, probably there's a question there as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously it is something which is not a one way. So it is not just that the individual adapts to the system. The individual also impacts the system. The individual does not have a complete control of it. You can't say that I'm the only one who's impacting the system. But the individual generates certain kinds of forces which will, let's take an example. Supposing you are a person who is very high on universe of strength and desire, and you are a part of a system which is extremely clannish. You will feel very uncomfortable there. You will push people. You will challenge people. You will confront people. You will tell them to, what is this boring kind? I don't know how many of you have seen this film called Village, which was a classical example of a clan system. Now, in that, if there are people who are high on universe of strength and desire, they will create certain forces. These forces, whether they become meaningful transformation for the system or they become disruptive is the question. All lack of, broadly speaking, alignment between the individual and the system is an opportunity for transformation. It's an opportunity for movement, provided it is understood. If it is complete alignment, then there will be stagnation. Transformation happens because there are gaps in alignment. Yeah, I thought there was some comment or question.
Yeah, there was a question. Would it be fair to say that EUM systems exist in all organizations? The degree may be different.
Elements of it, yeah. Yeah. The configuration, these elements, just as these elements are common to all individuals, but the configuration varies. Similarly, the various elements at the systemic level exist in all organizations, but the relative strength, relative importance varies. Yeah, you were saying something, right?
Yeah, Ashok, the thought that comes to me as you go through this is concepts like patriotism, nationalism, and so on. They all are part of the clan, the universe of belonging and protection. Would I be right?
Well, in a manner of speaking, yes.
Yeah, in a general way.
Yeah.
So, and yet the people who then sort of leverage upon that and become, in some ways, for want of a better word, let me put it that way, dictators. They come from the universe of strength and desire. So is there a bit of a dichotomy here saying that someone, even though they may feel uncomfortable with that, as you said, coming from the universe of strength and desire, they might not feel in place with the universe of belonging and protection. They could somehow be able to leverage and influence that system for their own benefit.
Sure. You see, yeah. You're saying something.
Laughing because Ram, in his own intuitive way, has actually gone ahead. Like the question that you're asking, actually, all of that is part of the next.
Okay, fine. I'm so sorry. I keep asking.
Sorry, it's just your intuitive genius. I mean, intuitive, you're asking exactly the question.
Okay.
You see, often, Ram, what also happens, and I'm coming to this question because I think it has, at the macro level today, it's a very significant question of what you are saying. Because what many people are being able to do, they are being able to use the unfulfilled needs of universe of belonging and protection by providing a certain thing. Because you see, what is happening, we are living in a world where in some ways the boundaries are becoming fluid. So you don't have that protection of being in your own nice, small little corner. You're living in a world which is wide open, which is open in terms of inflow of information, people, capital, products, markets, all kinds of things. Now this is very threatening. If we do not have viable ways of meeting our needs for universe of belonging and protection, it's open to exploitation by anyone.
Right.
There's a very interesting piece of research that I had come across, that many of these ultra fundamentalist organizations draw their membership from people who are cut off from their roots, who are migrant workers, who do not have a sense of belonging anywhere, and they offer them that, what you are calling the clan or the universe of belonging and protection, and are being able to utilize it. It's a very relevant question that we are asking from a very large, point of view of the kind of world that we are living in today.
I show a couple of questions here, which might be interesting. One is, John asked a question, if you drew a Venn diagram, an intersection of all these 6 universes, what then happens? Does it then, the meeting points, is that a point that the organization look towards going, addressing the needs of different people in the organization?
Very interesting. In fact, the entire construction of the EUM is on the basis of this intersection points. The reason I moved away from Graves or the original work, which was that it did not provide intersection points.
Okay.
And in reality, you are all the time dealing with only intersection points. You're never dealing with universe of belonging and protection in isolation. You are seeing it in relation to other universes, and it will become very clear when we go and look at GOT as an
I would like to remind
institution.
both of you of time. We have 50 minutes left.
How much? We have
50 minutes.
50 minutes left.
50 minutes. No?
Yeah.
So we have time.
So just one other question, Ashok.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give brief answers. Abhimanyu asked a question. Can you give an example of the universal of duality and simultaneity, as well as a holonic in an organizational term, in any organization that you have experienced?
Well, I've experienced elements of it.
Yeah.
I've experienced elements of it where, organizations, for instance, organizations which are able to move away from the established ways of looking at either markets, products, segments, and, who are willing to move out of that without rebelling for the sake of rebelling, kind of a thing. Organizations which have a fairly strong anchorage in values, but in a pragmatic way. So if I was to give a simple thing, you would find those organizations which are comfortable more equally with things like mission and vision as also specific goals and targets. Because what happens is that sometimes mission and vision become so abstract that it's not possible to relate them to day-to-day reality of the system. So where there is a strong link between these values are not just values which are written on paper, but become alive in the day-to-day functioning. Organizations which are willing to struggle with the dilemmas, which do not think that everything is easy and clear, where leadership looks at itself as primarily holders of what in India we call dharam sankatas, that they are very real dharam sankatas to be engaged with, or very real dilemmas. It's always a tightrope walk. There are no clear answers. Now, the individuals and organizations which are willing to live with that uncertainty and ambiguity, and to various degrees, organizations do, some more, some less.
Okay.
Specifically say a particular organization.
So, I mean, in a thing which comes up for me as you talk about this is, are the Scandinavian countries closer to this point as at least nations? I mean, you don't have to expand on it. Would that be a correct statement?
I don't know enough, but my gut feel is yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
I don't know enough to be able to say that.
Yeah. Okay. In the interest of time, you might like to move on.
All right. So let's go back and now again use this lens to look at GOT again. Now, if you look at GOT, what you find is a system which in EUM terms we will call a high clan and a high arena system. Now, what are some of the features of a high clan and high arena system? Can we just look at some of those features? These systems are close-knit aggressive outfits. They are quick to exploit opportunities. They are vigilant towards threats. They emphasize alpha male models of leadership. All relationships are determined by expediency and power dynamics. There is low reliance on formal systems, and there is high flexibility to select few. So the select few who are in positions of power, they can be arbitrary, no rules apply to them. They can act as they feel like, and there are no clear boundary systems and formal rules per se. So the flexibility is very high for some and very low for others. Power becomes now if you look at these, you would find that by and large, the system which has been described in Game of Thrones is a high clan, high arena system. Now, the next question that we ask is, if this is the nature of the system, then what would be the nature of membership that will emerge in the system? Obviously, there will be as much membership as there would be number of people, but for sake of some degree, some kind of categorization, we have put them in 4 broad categories. We call them the solid citizens, the lone rangers, the residue holders, and the disruptors or change makers. Since it's a high clan, high arena system, it is obvious that all its solid citizens will be people who are high on universe of belonging and protection and universe of strength and desire. So let's see what these are people who would preserve the system, and these are people who will be significant role holders in the system. These are people who are entrenched in both universe UBP and USD. They are people who acknowledge their basic needs and desires and fulfill them in familiar settings. Their world is generally split between friends and foes. Who's with me, who's not with me.
Or if you are not with me, then you must be against me.
Yes. They are submissive towards powerful and aggressive towards less powerful. They become aggressive when feeling insecure, and their interfaces are invariably accompanied by high tension and anxiety. Some of the examples of this from Game of Thrones are Cersei, Tywin Lannister, Khal Drogo, Stannis Baratheon, Lady Olenn, Catelyn Stark. These are some of the standout characters. Now you would see most characters in Game of Thrones who have significant role holders and who preserve the system are either high UBP, high USD individuals, because the system itself is that. So the system will encourage and take people who are high on both UBP and USD. Can we move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so since the system is high clan and high arena, what happens to individuals who are entrenched in universe of strength and desire, but are not comfortable with universe of belonging and protection? Now the individuals who are entrenched in the two become solid citizens. Now we look at those individuals who are entrenched in USD but deny UBP. We are seeing these individuals become lone rangers. They value attributes like autonomy, courage, risk-taking. They get restless with confinement and routine. They carry some mistrust and discomfort about the established norms. They have difficulty in making commitments and having roots because of their denial of UBP. They tend to become self-centric and insensitive to others. Some of the examples from GOT are Arya Stark, Bronn, Joffrey, essentially, from the system's point of view, what these people are really doing, they are acting out the repressed instincts which threaten clan. Keep in mind the system is high both in arena and clan. So therefore, the instincts have to be kept reined. Otherwise, the clan cannot survive. So it is dealing with the tension of the clan and arena. So all that which is repressed because of the need for a clan orientation is acted out by these individuals who are high in USD but who deny UBP. So you would find that these are people who would never, who are never can sustain and meaningfully take roles in the system. They can only be, side players. They can be loners. I think two excellent examples of this are Joffrey and the other fellow Ramsay. When they take significant roles in the system, they become despotic. Or like the first king, they become negligent. For them to be able to do sustained role taking becomes extremely difficult. Ram, you were saying something?
No, there was a question. I mean, we can come back to it later. There was just a question. What was it? Somebody had asked, Priya had asked, is the Maslow's need hierarchy, is it related to this model? My answer was, because of Graves and Maslow being connected, there's a correlation, but you can address it perhaps later.
Okay. Now we look at the third category of people.
Your brother's latest treasons.
Okay, before that, let's have a snippet.
Your brother's latest treasons.
Your Grace, whatever my traitor brother has done, I had no part. You know that. I beg you, please.
Tell her of this outrage.
Using some vile sorcery, your brother fell on Stafford Lannister with an army of wolves. Thousands of good men were butchered. After the slaughter, the Northmen feasted on the flesh of the slain.
Killing you would send your brother a message.
In an arena system, because vulnerable aspects, how can you own up vulnerability in arena? You'll be killed. So therefore, softness and vulnerability is held by the people in this system who are entrenched in UBP and deny the universe of strength and desire. They have strong commitment and loyalty to the system, our people. But they get dislocated by direct aggression because of their low association with universe of strength and desire. Generally, such people are never on the center stage. They remain in the background and serve without being noticed. Their role primarily becomes one of providing emotional support and infrastructure. Consequently, they become receptacles of the toxicity of the system. As we saw, in this case, Sansa, she is receiving the entire toxicity of the system. From GOT, some of the clear examples are of Samuel Tarly, Sansa Stark. Now, these are residue holders you would find in almost all systems, even in modern day systems. And sometimes I feel that people like us who are in the profession of either human resources or coaching or consulting become residue holders of behalf of the system. So all the residues of the system are in fact discharged in these relationships where the primary emphasis is to provide a certain emotional infrastructure and support. So while these people may seem like misfits, they are also serving a purpose. Their presence is also enabling the system to exist the way it is. On the face of it, you would say they are misfits, but they are not. They are actually playing a certain psychological role in the system.
Ashok, in the
Yeah.
Indian mythology, if you take the Mahabharata, would Bhishma be this person?
Very interesting, because there are so many multiple interpretations of Bhishma. Some people would see Bhishma as a lone ranger rather than as a residue holder. They would say, he was erratic, impulsive, did what he wanted to do, not always associated with empathy, compassion, and stuff like that. And may see actually Nakula a lot more as a residue holder. Though I personally I don't agree with that, but some people regard that as Nakula as the residue holder.
Okay.
Then we have the fourth category. Now these are people who are neither entrenched in UBP, universe of belonging and protection, nor in universe of strength and desire. Now what happens to such people? Firstly, what kind of people they generally are? These are people who are reasonably secure with themselves. They are not destabilized by power differentials. They are generally seen as fairly self-sufficient, and it's difficult to give anything to them because they seem very self-sufficient. Now, these people, in many ways, are actually a threat to the system. They are a threat to the system because they are not abiding by what the system requires them to be. So what does the system generally do with them? Generally, such people are accommodated in peripheral roles. These peripheral roles can be of a court jester. This peripheral role can be of an eccentric vagabond, a mystic. So the idea from the system's point of view, because it sees them as potential disruptors, and that is why we are saying disruptors. The system would provide them with such roles where their disruption can be contained, where they don't create an upheaval in the system. On the other hand, these are people who also have potential to provide transformative leadership in the system. If they are able to find a meaningful link with the system, these are the people who don't fully fit in with what the systemic parameters are, who can actually provide a certain transformative element. The examples from GOT are Jon Snow, Daenerys, Tyrion Lannister, Lord Varys. These are people who are in some ways not directly engaged, but they have the potential to become. And again, it depends on where they drop. Even within them, you will see, for instance, significant differences. For instance, if you look at Daenerys and Jon Snow, Jon is comfortable with the universe of meaningfulness and intimacy, but is not very comfortable with the universe of purpose and achievement. Consequently, he can only provide leadership for a larger cause. Whereas Daenerys is relatively comfortable with both, and therefore leadership comes to her a lot more naturally. I don't know how the serial will end finally in terms of what kind of resolution they will find to it. But till now, you can see that Daenerys walks into all leadership roles with a certain ease, which John doesn't. John can walk into a leadership role only when he believes that it is for a larger cause. And to that extent, Daenerys has a greater degree of ease with both universe of belonging and protection and universe of strength and desire, though she is not entrenched in them. Whereas John has an uncomfortable relationship with his own desires and his own ambitions. All right, so what does all this? If, for instance, if one is taking a systemic coaching perspective, and if one has to coach such these people, whether in an individual setting or in a group setting, what would be the emphasis? Considering that we look at systemic coaching primarily as a way in which the individual can review his or her engagement with the system, his or her nature of membership, and psychological role taking. So, when it comes to solid citizens, the primary emphasis becomes to help them to see how they are colluding with the system. Because these are people who will actually not let the system transform. They are in a collusive relationship with the system. So unless you can help them see that how their collusion is blocking both their own unfolding and the unfolding of the system. And often this collusion is in spite of themselves. This is not a collusion that they are doing it out of any malafide intent. Some of them may be doing. But even sometimes that collusion can be with very bona fide intent. Ned Stark is a classical example of that, where he's also colluding with very honorable intent. So intent is not the issue here. But unless you can help the individual see the nature of his or her collusion, it is not easy for the individual to reconfigure the nature of membership and role taking in the system. We come to lone rangers. When you are working with lone rangers, the primary emphasis has to be to help them acknowledge their need for belonging and safety, and price they may be paying by not denying it. So oftentimes the price which they pay is by not fulfilling their potential, of becoming the troubleshooters in the system. Like many lone rangers, forget GOT, even in modern day organizations, right, end up being remembered only when there is a crisis, because they are great for crisis management. So you would have come across many managers who are used for crisis management and then they are put aside. And it's often said that, look, they don't have the strategic wherewithal to, they're only good for crisis management. So the lone rangers, unless they acknowledge their own need for belonging and protection, unless they acknowledge their own need to put down roots, end up only becoming crisis managers in the system. Then we have the residue holders. Unless these residue holders recognize their own potency and are willing to take some risks with themselves, they would only remain caught with in victim roles, or provide only, I'm sure you would have all come across people, managers who are often said, he's a very good person, but not a very effective manager. Is a lovely human being, but not very effective. So you end up getting slotted in only being a kind of an help help provider, infrastructure provider, backroom player, and never discover your own potency. Finally, we have the fourth category of disruptors and change makers. And I think this is where coaching can really, really be powerful. If you can help them see how their misalignment can be a resource rather than being a burden. People who are very aligned with the system are not the ones who can transform the system very easily. They end up colluding. It is only people who are partly in sync with the system, but can also see the system through an outsider's gaze. So these are the people from the point of view of effective change and transformation, where coaching can be extremely powerful. Oftentimes, many of these people, they get caught with their own idiosyncrasies. Oftentimes, they settle into what I call the peripheral roles. And the peripheral roles could also be, for instance, I called coaches as residue holders. Many times coaches are also disruptors and change makers. But it becomes difficult for them to take the center stage and then meaningfully impact the system as a whole. So to me, the primary thing in systemic coaching is how do we help the individual renegotiate his or her relationship with the system and find a way where it can be more meaningful both for herself and for the system at large.
Time for questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are, I mean, there have been certain comments.
Yeah.
Someone says that he wants to see the whole series of GOT again with human mind. But there aren't any specific questions at this point in time unless somebody wants to put in something here. But one thing that comes up for me in answer to the question that I asked earlier, which Shabri said the answer will come later, is that these change makers or mavericks, the last one, are the people who are internally fairly self-empowered and they have the power to change the system if they wish to, if they work on it. And probably the other extreme are the people who are disempowered and allow the system to move along the way it does, who could be the residue holders. So would that be a correct way of interpreting?
You see, many times, even these people, they disempower themselves. Like if you look at someone like John is also, at least till now up to a point, as I was saying, he's able to exercise leadership only when he's sure that it is for a larger cause. So what that does is that he does not give to himself the legitimacy to be a leader. So they are not necessarily. So even these people disempower themselves in different ways. So for them to be able to empower themselves, coaching can help a lot. It is not that these people have no issues to deal with. They are not caught with systems dysfunctionalities and pathology, but they have their own issues.
So if you apply that to a normal organization, normal in the sense every organization is dysfunctional to some extent, within which you have probably not just one universe of belonging, there are multiple depending upon the clans and so on, and within which each of them, there is a warrior leader who's the strength and desires kind of guy, and there are systems and things in place, which is the universal rules and behavior and stuff like that. So when you are looking at this, like what John earlier pointed out about the intersection of these and coming together, and that is where really probably some of the answers lie. I mean, if in the next 10 minutes or so we have, I mean, are there any kind of pointers that you can give us when we look at an organization, how we can maybe quickly interpret some of these to make add value to the organization.
Okay. Let me take, we see, because here we are talking of an organization which is entrenched in clan and arena. Now, it is not true for all organizations.
Right.
Let's look at an organization which is entrenched in clockwork, right? Which is so rigid in terms of following rules, going by the line, everything has to be crossing the T's and dotting the I's and everything, where the rule book becomes everything. I'm sure you have come across organizations like that, which are entrenched in clockwork. Now, someone who has a high USD does not share the pathology of the organization. But will he necessarily be an effective change maker? No. Because he has to deal with his own issues. In order to find a meaningful engagement, if this person remains stuck in his universe of strength and desire, he will only be a disruptor. So, for this person to be able to be an effective change maker, this person has to also deal with his own entrenchments, with his own issues. It is, yes, he does not share the system's pathology. He doesn't share the system's dysfunctionality. But that does not mean that he has no issues of his own. He also has to deal with his own issues. Only then can he be an effective change maker.
No, that is fair, Ashok, which is where the holonic concept in some way applies, I guess. Yeah. That individual within himself needs to arrive at certain changes and the larger system as well. Okay, a couple of points out here.
Can I just add here one thing?
Yeah.
The disruptors, change makers usually are people who are looking at the misalignment with the system as more of a burden than an opportunity. And when they look at it more as a burden than an opportunity, what they do is they usually remain on the sideline of the system. So they become very good commentators. They become extremely good observers. They know exactly what are the ills of the system. However, because of the misalignment, they may not actually take the center stage like the first category will take. The first category will very happily take the center stage and say, okay, this is my system and I'm willing to do this. They will not take the center stage, and that is how the potential to change and transformate the system may not always be there. They may not see themselves as useful apart from just being a commentator and an observer. And I think that's where the transformation needs to work with them. How do they look at this as an opportunity?
Yeah, but Shabri, trying to bring a slightly different lens is, let's say we take people like Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, people like that, Martin Luther King. They were people who refused to accept the system. They were, in that sense, change maker. They were disruptors. But the point is, what gave them their power was that misalignment with the system. But they took center stage. They were willing to risk their lives.
Absolutely.
Perhaps one of the things is, if such people do that, they will get assassinated. Maybe, I don't know. So that is one of the risks that they run. But it's not quite right that the disruptors do not take center stage. There are many disruptors who have taken center stage and paid with their lives as well.
Ram, what is being said is that misalignment with the system is a necessary condition to be a change maker.
Right.
But it is not sufficient.
Okay.
That's the point.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It is necessary, but it is not sufficient.
Yeah.
Because if you are only misaligned and doing nothing about it, about that misalignment, and not looking at your own entrenchments, your own issues, the people like Gandhi or Mandela did one hell of a lot of work with themselves.
Yeah.
Before they started working with the system.
Okay.
Just by being misaligned is, yes, it is necessary, and that's important, but it's not sufficient. And that's where I think coaching can help.
Absolutely. That's a very brilliant point, Ashok. And using a coaching context, it's a very Carl Rogerian kind of truism. He says, if you wish to be a coach, first you have to be self-aware. You need to remove your baggage before you can pretend to coach other people.
Absolutely.
The trouble is many of us are trying to be disruptors in the coaching arena without knowing what baggages we carry. And our judgments are huge barriers for our own clarity. So that is absolutely. I mean, thanks a lot, Ashok. We are pretty much on top of that. We just have a couple of minutes left. There are still many questions. I'm not sure whether, what we can do is we will pass on these the chat box to you and Shabri, and you can take a look at it. And we can carry your answers in our blog. And we would also love to carry your total presentation on the blog with the videos as well. And this could be a powerful message that is going out, how the EUM perspective can be used in different contexts, for example. And one of the things that comes up for me, somebody also said it in the chat box, can we apply to other things, maybe Mahabharata, for example. So
sure, yeah.
we could have another session on that. And once again, I mean, any closing words from the two of you, Shabri and Ashok, before we close? I've already passed on the password. I've requested people to apply for the CCUs if they wish. And truly, totally, thank you very, very much as an integral part of the systemic coaching series. Thank you.
What I didn't get that part. You said CC thing. What does that mean?
No. This is for the ICF members. There is a continuing credits that we need to give. So I given that. So don't worry about that. Yeah. So if you have any last words between the two of you, we have another minute or so left.
I absolutely enjoyed being here.
It's great. You know, I'm not very comfortable with the medium because I miss the direct interaction of, you know, people asking questions and you're responding to them and they're saying something. But I think thank you so much, Ram, for the opportunity.
Ashok,
it was great talking to you.
All I can say is you better get used to it. The more popular you are, the more numbers come. You won't be able to interact with everybody. You have to find a way how you can do this with people in between you and the audience.
No,
okay?
But I enjoyed interacting with you. I think that was great. Thank you so much. At least I saw some messages here.
Yeah. I wanted to tell you that tomorrow we are starting the next EUM I certification workshop.
Yeah.
I'll see you there.
Yeah. I totally. Next time around, I'll come and we will promote your program. And let us have the presentation, Shabri, and we would like to carry that. And we are